Welcome to section 6.4 where we discuss organic chemistry, or really we're going to call this the chemistry of life. So this is going to deal with the chemicals that living organisms tend to be composed of. And when you talk about organic chemistry, it really revolves around one key element. And that element is going to be our good friend carbon here. Now carbon has some characteristics that make him fairly unique amongst the other elements. And one of those is he likes to form bonds, specifically 4 covalent bonds, which is pretty much the max that you can do. And he's willing to form bonds not just with other elements, but also with himself. So you can get some things like graphite and coal that are essentially all carbons bonded to other carbons. If you like pretty things, diamond is another example of that, where it's a bunch of carbons bonded to each other. You'll also see that carbon likes forming lots of different types of bonds. Namely, when we talk about bonds, and this will be more complex to get too in depth with, but there's some where you just bond once with somebody else. There's some where you can bond twice with the same other partner, and there's some times where you can actually bind 3 times with a particular other atom. That's the max that can happen. Carbon is willing to do all of these. So you can have carbon singly bound to other things, you can have it with 2 bonds shared between 2 particular atoms, or 3. So anytime you change any of the guys that are involved in this particular molecule, anytime you change the bonds involved, like if you change it from a single to a double, you get a new substance with new characteristics. And this is what allows us to have a ridiculous number of possible molecules that we can get in organic chemistry. Because you have some simple things that are organic that are composed of just a few carbons, and then you've got some that are composed of potentially hundreds or thousands of carbons. And if you change even one single guy that's attached to that, if you change it from a chlorine that's attached to an iodine that's attached, just a different element in one spot, you can get a different molecule with different characteristics. And sometimes you don't even have to change the particular guys involved. So right down here you'll see that we've got these 2 different types of elements that are attached to carbon. Carbon's in black. You'll see that carbon is bonded to itself, there's 6 of them, to form a ring, a hexagon. And then ultimately we've got 6 guys that are attached to those carbons. Now in this case we've got 2 that are represented as being white. It doesn't really matter what they are here. You don't have to worry, it's just one particular element. So if it makes it easier for you, you can think it's chlorine. Why not? And then we've got green here, which let's just say if you want something else, that's a different element. So let's say hydrogen. Whatever, it really doesn't matter. But if you have these, you'll see that if we have these 6 carbons, 4 hydrogens, and 2 chlorines, you can have the same formula. It's the same pieces. But if we rearrange them, just simple rearrangement, we also get completely different molecules. And so in this case, you'll see the chlorines are basically on opposite sides. And because of that, this will be one particular structure, one particular molecule. Now, if we kind of rotate this, so we've got 3 hydrogens on one side, and then the chlorines just have 1 hydrogen between them, this is a new arrangement and would have potentially different characteristics. Just like if we put the 2 chlorines together, so they're right next to each other, you once again get a different molecule that can have its own different characteristics. So this is just meant to give you guys just an understanding of why carbon is so amazing and why we have so many different molecules that we can have in the plethora of life that allow for life to do so many different functions. It's not like we're even near maxing out the number of organic molecules that can be made or that organisms could use. There's tons and tons and tons and tons that are still out there that we haven't discovered or no organisms have evolved to produce and use. And so there's all kinds of different ways for, as life continues on, us to get more and more examples of these organic chemicals that life can use to help them survive. Now, when we talk about a lot of the organic molecules, a lot of these guys are going to be big. And so we're going to call these macromolecules to just kind of emphasize that these are not our general molecule. It's not like it's CO2. It's not like it's oxygen gas, O2. This is not water, H2O. These are big. And so a lot of these macromolecules are going to consist of hundreds of atoms, if not thousands. And so that's why we're going to give them kind of a special place. We're also going to find that a lot of these macromolecules are what makes up our cells. So if we try to analyze the specific chemical composition of the structures in our cells, we're going to keep coming back to these different types of macromolecules that actually compose them. Now, when we talk about macromolecules, though, I want to make sure you guys don't think that we're building a macromolecule from scratch, because in most cases we're not. What we're going to see is that the way things work is we have these small little molecular pieces. And we're going to call these pieces monomers. And we've got different types of monomers, and if we can fit kind of different types of monomers together with other similar types of monomers. So it's not like one monomer is universal. We're going to have essentially a monomer that's called a monosaccharide or a sugar, and that would be used to build up things that are large sugar-containing compounds. We'll get into that when we talk about carbohydrates. You know, we've got monomers that we can stick together to form DNA, a type of nucleic acid. Those would be called nucleotides. And we've got monomers called amino acids that stick together to form proteins. So we're going to have these different classes of monomers, but they're all going to act a lot like a single Lego piece. Where as long as you have the equivalent monomers, they kind of fit together. So we can use this kind of system to attach a bunch of these monomers and get a polymer. Poly just meaning many, so it's a bunch of monomers together. So if we want to build a particular structure, in this case it's meant to be a castle, I believe, but it could just as easily be in organic organisms, DNA or proteins like enzymes. We ultimately do this by getting the right smaller pieces, these monomers, and sticking the right monomers together in the right order to eventually make this larger macromolecule polymer structure. And then those are ultimately what we stitch together to make up things like our cells.